We all feel stress from time to time, and sometimes more often than we would like. Today, we're talking about chronic stress and its impact on us and how we can fight back against burnout. So, if you've ever felt like the stress in your life is beginning to affect how you show up, this is the episode for you. You're listening to the Begin Within Health Show with Nate Slager. For more, go to beginwithin.fit/podcast, or to enroll right now in our flagship coaching program, go to beginwithin.fit/coaching. All right, I already teed up the episode for you. Today we're talking about burnout. My guest today is Hannah Tackett. She is a former tech leader with 16 years of experience. Now she dedicates herself to coaching against burnout. She navigated her own career-halting burnout. She's going to talk to us about that. And now she empowers high-achieving women to recognize and overcome the pressures of professional life. In particular, what I want you to listen for are the 3 stages of burnout. Hannah is going to outline those very clearly so that hopefully, like me, you'll be able to hear yourself somewhere in one of those stages. Or I guess I shouldn't say that. Maybe hopefully you won't even hear yourself in one of those stages, but more than likely you will. And as we do, just remember that's okay. We're here to improve. We're here to get better at how we deal with stress. So we're going to talk as well, not just about the stages of burnout, but we are going to talk about how to recalibrate when stress starts to affect how we are showing up. All right, let's get to it. Here's my interview with Hannah Tackett.
Well, it had been building up for a while. I think this is true of most people who experience it. Is like you have red flags, you have stress, you have misery, you have all these, this pile up of things that you just push down, right? Because, we're a culture of hustle and we're a culture of almost toxic positivity, like just keep swimming, right? Do the Dory thing, just keep going. And it got to a point where I could not keep going. I couldn't get out of bed. For over a month, I was in bed. I went to the doctors. There was nothing actually wrong with anything in my body that, registered on a panel or a test. And so it was really just that I was completely fried. I had nothing left to give. I was exhausted. And the reason that last burnout was the tipping point for me, because I'd burned out before. I pushed myself to the point of sickness before. But this last one was different in that I had a family to support. I wasn't single. It wasn't just me. I had shifted into this career that I honestly loved, and I'd fought so hard to get in the door and so hard to make it happen. But I didn't want to lose my career. I didn't want to fail to show up as the mom that I wanted to be. I didn't want to fail at my marriage. I had things on the line that I deeply cared about, even though in some ways you could say those things are helped to cause the burnout, but really it was my approach, the way I was showing up, that caused the burnout. So the tipping point for me was being flat on my back in bed, realizing that I was failing as a mom. I was failing in my career. I was failing across the board. I was dropping all the balls, and that was completely unacceptable. And up until that point in my life, I'd always been like the overachiever, the one that always got it done. I'd been called a unicorn. I was like the rock star. I was the one that did it all, right? And then here I was. I'm like, I'm doing nothing. I'm not getting up. I'm not showing up. I'm failing across the board. That was really when I decided that I had to prioritize my health and my recovery and prioritize making sure that it never happened again. And on that journey of recovering from burnout to regaining my health, regaining my focus, learning how to show up for my career in a different way, I met a lot of women who had the same struggle, or were currently burning out, recovered from a burnout, or didn't even know what was wrong with them, but they weren't showing up the way that they knew they could, and they felt terrible about it. And it was just like this downward spiral. So I knew that there was work to do in the space. And so I started to help others. And I think that that's a story for, I'm sure, a lot of people, where you experience something awful you figure it out, and then you go and you help others in your space.
Yeah. I think I think that there's a certain, I don't know what type of person it is, but there's just a certain type of brain where it's like, all right, I can teach this now that I lived through it, and others kind of just walk away from from the
Right.
the
Right.
situation. Okay, I'm good. Let's get back to what I was doing before. So, and I don't think either one's right or wrong. I just, yeah. Okay. Tell me about burnout, if you could.
Hmm.
I mean, I feel like I could define it, but I'm curious what definition you would put on burnout. Like how do I know if I'm about to or suffering from it or have, like what would be a definition that, I guess, and I'm not
Yeah.
asking you to be a dictionary, but just from your perspective and the work that you're doing, what is
Abs-
burnout?
Absolutely. So, what is burnout? Burnout is kind of like a catch-all phrase to describe a couple different things. And it's not, a diagnosis or a medical condition or anything like that. But essentially, what it is unmanaged chronic stress that affects your ability to be productive or to show up. And the way it looks, like there's red flags along the way. And a lot of people experience it and they see other people experiencing it and they think, oh, it's like a flip, a switch is flipped, and suddenly you're flat on your back, you're not showing up, or you're just miserable at work and you hate everything and you're resenting everything and you wish you could quit. But there's things that are going on before you get to the point where you're like, I think I'm burnt out, you know? And so I like to think of it as like stages. So like the first stage of burnout is signs that, the stress is getting to you. And that can look like, irritability, anxiety, insomnia, poor concentration, some tummy troubles or headaches or migraines. And those are your early warning signs to change the way that you're showing up in the world, change the way that you're showing up in your career to manage the stress. But oftentimes, we live in that culture of hustle, like I mentioned earlier, we just ignore it. We just keep going, right? And it's applauded to just keep going. Show up to work when you're sick, call in, not maybe not in person, but call in, show up, work on your vacation. Um, and then the second stage is like that emotional impact. So like the cynicism, the detachment starts to occur more frequently. So signs that you're, mentally checking out are maybe loss of enjoyment, pessimism, isolation, that feeling of detachment or disassociation, like you just don't care anymore. Being chronically late, whether it's late for showing up or just delivering things late or just pushing it off into the very, very, very last minute. And then the biggest one, or I think the one that's the most easy to tune into, is resentment. So if you are resenting your job, you're resenting your boss, you're resenting maybe at home, your situation at home, or just the life in general, like all the things that you've worked so hard to make happen in your life, and you're like, I'm over it. I can't keep going, doing too much. That resentment is like the red flag, like, hey, do something about it now. Do something about it now. Because stage 3 is when it affects your ability to show up. And so it kind of causes like a certain level of ineffectiveness. And some people experience it as health issues. Other people should experience it as poor performance, where you're actually being called out at work for not doing your job. And then some people experience it as just like mentally shutting down, like you've got extreme brain fog, you can't think anymore, you can't remember anything. So essentially, it's affecting your performance, your ability to show up. Some people like me end up in bed. Some people end up in the ER. Um, and so essentially, that third stage, on varying degrees of it, is you're not showing up like with it you need to. And that one's kind of tragic because that not only does it affect your ability to show up, but it affects your confidence. And you start to lose faith in yourself that you can even do it, that you can even show up, that this is fixable. And the longer you stay in that third stage, the longer it takes to recover, because it really does exhaust your nervous system. So that's how I like to think of it and kind of categorize like the journey to burnout, because it looks externally like, someone flipped a switch and then they're just done. And sometimes when you're experiencing it, it feels that way. You're like, I can't get out of bed. Where'd this come from? But really the signs were there all along. It's just that we've all been trained to kind of dismiss them, ignore them, push them down, make nothing of them, and just carry on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think culturally, at least level one of the three, like
Hmm.
we like that's just normal, right? That's just that's
Yeah. It's
I
normal.
think the culture is like, that's life. Like, that's the way life is, right?
Yeah.
And the more probably, even level two, I'm like, oh, well, that's just people just doing regular life that now are maybe more outspoken about it, or maybe take it a little too personally. Maybe we think, but I appreciate that you um, acknowledge that these are symptoms. There's signs, maybe warning signs. Is that the best way to
I'd
put
say
it?
warning sign, like red flags. Like the early ones, those are easy to
Red
shift.
flags. Yeah.
Yeah. And then once you're in that stage two, that is like a red flag if you're feeling resentful, if you're feeling cynical or detached, that's the big red flag that you need to shift how you're showing up,
Got it.
and prioritize yourself.
Yeah. And I guess, I look at things through my own personal filter. I've definitely had times where I'm just like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I'm done with this. Is that level two?
It's there. Yeah. That's one of the things. Like that doesn't mean quit. What that does mean is like take a look at how you're showing up and figure out where you need the margin in your life, where you need to complete the stress cycle. Take a look and see, are you even in alignment with your own values, or are you living someone else's dream? And so there's a little bit of introspect. That's like a call to action to do a little bit of introspection.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me about completing the stress cycle. I think that's such an interesting phrase. Could you dig into that a little?
Yeah. So stress is normal. Like we said, all these feelings, well, they're normal. Yes. And what goes up must come down. So if your cortisol is spiked, your stress levels are spiked, you're having an intense moment, that's fine. But those need to come back down, right? All those hormones need to come back down. That elevation in your heart rate needs to come back down. Your body needs to resettle. And that can happen all day long. As we're going through life, we have moments of stress, we have moments of recalibration. When things start to go off is when those moments of recalibration don't happen. And I think that the reason we're seeing more and more burnout is because we're seeing more and more people use that white space in life, those spaces in between, whether it's in between meetings or when you're waiting to pick up your kids or when you're going to the bathroom, those spaces in between, and we're on our phone. So we're not turning off. We're not like dropping it and processing what's going on. The minute we have a second, we're instantly, we're in the scroll, we're checking our email, we're doing all these things that keep us on and engaged. And that stress cycle never complete because our bodies and our minds never have time to actually process what just happened because we're on to the next thing. So I grew up before the internet, before the, phones were a thing, outside of like the one, attached to your mom's wall. And so there was a lot of white space on life. There was a lot of just time in between things where if you didn't have a sketchbook or a book, there was nothing to do. So there was a lot more, I think, calmer pace, and your body had more time to process your feeling and your thoughts. So if you had a really stressful, awful moment, whether it was a confrontation with a boss, you had time to mull on it.
Yeah.
Because, when you're driving home or maybe, you're listening to something, but you're not checking on your phone, you're not scrolling, you're not doing all these things that we do now that completely hijack our brain and our bodies. And we don't actually complete that stress cycle. And that's one way to do it, is just to have the white space to feel things. Other ways that we can complete the cycle is to walk or to, do any kind of movement with our bodies. I know people are moving a lot less than they were 10 years ago. And that's another really powerful way to complete the stress cycle, because a lot of our stress is like, your body's sending all these signals, sending blood to the legs, doing all these things to get you ready to like go run away from a bear. And then we sit and we do nothing with it. So we're not releasing those hormones. We're not using up the energy that's just been, shoved into your body. And so we're just sitting. And then, so there's a lot of ways that we're not completing the stress cycle that maybe 10 years ago was a little bit more common or easier to do. And I think that that's kind of contributing to the higher levels of burnout that people are saying that they're experiencing.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I was thinking even work itself, right? I think a lot of jobs, more manual labor, it was like work that you could do, you could be expending energy, and then your brain could also be somewhere else. It was yeah, you could process things while you were moving. That was actually what people did for a living.
Yeah.
And now it's just like, don't move and just use your brain for other things.
Constantly. Never turn
Yes.
it off. Yeah, and that's
Interesting.
incredibly unhealthy. If that's all you do all
Yeah.
day long, yes, you're probably
Right.
not gonna be in a great space. You need to balance it out.
Wow. Okay. So the completing the stress cycle, recalibrating, use that word. Those are kind of synonymous in terms of like our conversation. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I like them both. For me, recalibrating, just like okay, I connect with that one. I understand it right away. All right, recalibrate. So creating white space, getting some movement. Other ways that we can recalibrate. What else are things that are helping people that you're working with?
Right. So those are like the basic things that you can do on a daily basis is just put your phone down, give yourself some white space, unplug at the end of the day. Movement, any kind of movement. I don't mean, go work out, just anything. Go dance, go for a walk. It doesn't just walk your dog, any kind of movement. Another big one is tapping into oxytocin. So, you've got cortisol is a hormone, oxytocin kind of like is its counterbalance. So, petting a dog, hugging your children, have sex with your spouse or your partner, do things that connect you to the people and if it's an animal, they're animals that you love. And that's a really powerful, easy way to kind of drop those stress levels pretty quickly. Having phone conversations on the phone with your friend, basically connecting with others, and get that oxytocin going. Those are very powerful ways to alleviate stress. Um, and also there's recalibration. So we're talking about that. So there's, all the things that I think most of us kind of know, right? How to lower our stress levels, whether or not we think it's important enough to actually
Right.
do
Right. No,
and get
should
it in
do.
our
Yeah.
calendar and make it happen is another thing. But there's the movement, there's also breath. Um, Doing 2 minutes of deep breathing is incredibly powerful. It'll completely reset your nervous system. None of us actually do it. It's one of those you should brush floss your teeth every night. How many people do it? Not many. I think that's one of those things that's common. We all know it, but we don't do it. Um, so those are like the, basic self-care stuff that we can do. And then another thing to prevent the stress from happening, because a lot of the stress that women who are struggling with burnout, people who are struggling with burnout feel is a disconnection from their value. So a lot of that resentment that builds up with the work and like all these other things are coming from a place of maybe they're people pleasing. They're doing all this stuff to make other people happy. They're taking on all the extra projects. They want to keep their boss happy. They want to keep their husband happy. They want to keep their kids happy. They want to keep their coworkers happy. They want to keep their teammates happy. They want to keep their reports happy. And so they're spread super thin because they're just on. They got to keep everybody happy. So there's the people pleasing. There's the overachieving. And I relate to this one where it's like you've got a list of goals, right? And you just keep going. You keep knocking them off, knocking them off, knocking them off. And you never stop to celebrate or even acknowledge like the 10 things that you did yesterday that were awesome. They're like the overachievers among us who are just constantly going, 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 going without ever celebrating and really experiencing the moment of being in that achievement. And another, I think of these as like the success trap, so like the 5 success traps. So these are like the almost like the behaviors that can drive you to success. So the people pleasing, the overachieving, one of them is like being a helper. So you see someone who needs help, you jump in and you do it for them. Whether that's your kids at home with their laundry or your coworkers or your teammates at work with their projects, you're just helping everyone and really kind of overextending yourself. And then there's the perfectionism, which I think we've all heard about, but having those impossibly high standards, that maybe that was part of what drove you to success because you're well known as being detail oriented and having high standards, but then out of balance or driven by fear, it can definitely lead to burnout. And so those things cause additional stress and they lead to burnout largely because the work level that we're taking on is too much. And oftentimes it's not even what we want to be doing. So I think getting back to, well, what are your values? What actually matters to you? And getting in alignment with what your yes is. Like, what do you want to say yes to? And with intention, not just say yes to everything. Is like a really big shift that we can make. Aside from just doing the things to lower our stress levels on a daily basis, get super clear on what your yes is. And then once you have a clear yes, like I absolutely think this one thing is really important to me. Like when I made the decision, like I need to prioritize my health. Number one, that's my yes. I'm saying yes to being healthy. I'm no longer putting myself at the very bottom of all the list. I'm going to be at the top of the list. And that was really hard for me. Um, so whatever your yes is, however you're going to make that shift to saying yes to what really matters to you. And that can be, I'm saying yes to, I want our, between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. to be blocked off. That's time with my young children and whatever. I don't care about the rest of the day. I'll work whenever I can fit it in. Or whether you're saying yes to, actually, I don't want this project. I want that one over there, and finding a way to strategically shift to be on the project that you actually want. So by saying yes and by, pursuing your yes, it is invigorating. So it'll start to fill your cup with energy. So you'll stop feeling that like soul sucking drain that happens when we're doing things that we don't actually want to be doing, whether those things are motivated by perfectionism, by fear, by wanting to be a people pleaser, whatever it is. So saying yes to you, pursuing your yes is like the first thing that we do. And it is really, really powerful in lowering stress, boosting energy, and getting people really, really focused. And then once you're saying yes to something, it's really easy to start saying no. And that's a whole nother skill set.
Nice. Yeah, that's where I leave my head right away when you said say yes. I've heard so many times. If you're gonna say yes to something, that means you're saying no to something else. You have to be aware of that. Wow. Okay, so my initial thinking here, Hannah, was that we were our 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 hope was I can recognize the red flags and I can recalibrate when I need to. But that is almost now as I'm listening, I'm like, wait, that's sort of like it's an intermediate type of skill. The best thing would be if the things I'm doing are filling my cup.
Absolutely.
Okay. Nice. Um, how wow. Oh man, I'm like, whoo, I'm almost out of time with you already. I have more questions. How do you recommend that someone analyze kind of their yes and make sure that it's in alignment with those values that you mentioned? Or is this more of kind of a trial and error type of thing to make sure, okay, I feel like my cup is being filled now? Or are there
Right.
some ways ahead of time where I can make a more educated guess based on what I know about myself or
There's a
past?
few different things I do with my clients. There's like, 3 or 4 core exercises that we do together to kind of really get clarity on their yes. But one of them that's like really, I think, easier to do, that would be easy to explain it in like 2 minutes,
Yeah.
uh, is to take a look at your calendar and start assessing whether something is giving you energy or taking it away.
Oh, nice.
So when you're looking at all the meetings you got for the day, all of your activities, and you can, even color code it, like this drains me, this fills my cup, this is neutral. Once you've got it mapped out, then you can start the process of saying yes to more of the things that fill your cup and finding ways to say no. And there's like a bunch of different ways to say no, whether it's delegating, automating, minimizing, or just straight getting rid of it, to the things that are sucking your soul out, or even just diminishing your energy or pulling you down. So that's an easy way to start shifting that balance. But then there's obviously more work that you can do to like get deeper into what really matters to me. Who am I? What will fill my cup the most, or help me to feel most passionate and engaged with the world. But that first step, just like what's draining me, what can fill my cup,
Yeah.
where I am today without like radically changing my life. Like that's a really small thing, but very powerful
Nice.
thing to do.
Absolutely. And so practical. And I'm sure that as you start to see the patterns of what's helping versus
Mhm.
not, that can help lead you in the right direction, I would
Right.
think. Yeah, nice. A coach that was coaching me, uh, the phrase that we came up with, this is probably 2 years ago, but I remember I wrote it on the top of my journal page for a long time. And it was, is this making or taking?
Mhm.
And for me, that phrase it kind of helped guide my decisions as I was planning, as I was just looking at the things that I was focusing on. Is it making or taking?
I like that.
That little exercise just reminded me of that. Oh, that's great. Um, Last question. Someone's listening. They're like, okay, red flags. I'm probably close to burnout. What would be what might be the most important thing that you'd recommend for them to do? I know I'm putting you on the spot here. I know there's a lot of things. I guess maybe another way to phrase it would be, what would be the thing that your clients find initial intervention wise that helps them out the most?
I
Go
think that
ahead.
the most important thing that you can do is realize that it's important to prioritize yourself. I think most of the women that I've worked with feel very guilty about prioritizing their own care. So I think just realizing and acknowledging that you are the linchpin of your life and investing in yourself will get you exponential returns in your career, family relationships, and health, all these other things that you've been prioritizing. You really are the first step. So taking the time and the energy to prioritize your own well-being and to prioritize pursuing your yes and figuring out what that means is the most important thing you can do to exponentially, accelerate the results everywhere else.
That shift in mindset.
The mindset shift. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, cool. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you, follow your work?
Right. So you can find me at serenesuccess.net. And I've got a gift for everyone. So if you do serenesuccess.net/pod, POD, you will find a cheat sheet on how to slash your hours while still being perceived as a top performer. So you can start making those shifts, getting rid of the things that are sucking you dry, and carve out time and energy to prioritize yourself and start the process of ending and preventing burnout.
Nice. Okay. serenesuccess.net/pod. Yes. Okay. We'll get it. We'll have it in the show notes. Awesome. Hannah Tackett, thank you so much for being here with us.
All right. Thank you. Lovely.
So many great little tidbits there inside our interview with Hannah Tackett. Of course, like we talked about, you can jump over to serenesuccess.net/pod and get her free gift, which is going to help you to cut your working hours by 20%. Grab her cheat sheet there, her free gift for you, serenesuccess.net/pod. It's waiting for you. Get on over there and grab that free gift. Now, a couple of things that I want to recap before you move on, before you run off to the rest of your busy day. First and foremost, how about those stages of burnout? How are you doing? How are you really doing with those? Did you see yourself somewhere in one of those stages? Is stress starting to affect you in a negative way? Stress can be a very good thing, especially when we're dealing with it in a healthy way. But is it starting to affect you negatively? Then it's absolutely time to recalibrate. Take action. Take one of the steps that Hannah was so kind to remind us about. Perhaps something you have heard of before. Perhaps something you've done before that has actually worked to help you as you deal with stress. But sometimes we just get into it. We're just going through life and stress is affecting us. And maybe we're not all that honest about the toll that it's taking on us. As a result, we might tend to ignore the symptoms and even the ways that we've recalibrated in the past that have really, really helped us. We tend to just leave them unaccessed in our life. We don't take advantage of them. So I know that's true of me. For me, I have things, I know they work, they help me so much, but sometimes I don't take the time to actually do it. This is a nice wake-up call for all of us, isn't it? What works for you to recalibrate, to create some white space? Is it putting your phone down? Is it just sitting outside in a nice, calm, peaceful setting? Maybe doing some journaling, maybe calling a friend or a loved one that is a wonderful support for you. Maybe getting some movement in, using up some of that energy. Maybe it's focusing on just some nice, calming, deep breathing. Like Hannah mentioned, just a couple minutes, we can recalibrate in a lot of cases if we invest a little bit of time in doing that. So that's my call to action for you. If stress is taking its toll on you, if it's starting to have a negative effect, that's okay. The question is, what are you doing about it? What are you doing to recalibrate? What are you doing to take better care of yourself so that you can complete the cycle of the stress so that it's not unresolved. Take that action step. Now, my ultimate action step for you would be, if you can't do it right now, as soon as you're done listening, to schedule some time in the next day. Get out your calendar right now and block some time out for you to do that, to recalibrate, to create some white space, some space for you in your life. And perhaps the message we really needed to hear was what Hannah concluded with, that shift in mindset to realize that we have to do this. We are the linchpin for ourselves. If we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't manage our stress, if we don't create time to recalibrate when we need it, if we don't take the steps we need to complete the stress cycle, then we are headed for a place that none of us want to be, and that's a place where we can't show up anymore. That's burnout. So let's listen to the signs and symptoms. Let's pay attention to the red flags, and let's do something about it right now. I would love to know what works for you. I'd love to know what it is that really helps you to recalibrate. Please share it with me. Hop over to social media, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is. Find me, Nate Slager. I'm there. Send me a message. I'd love to have a quick conversation about what it is that helps you to recalibrate when stress is starting to have some negative effects, when it's starting to get to you. Share it with me. I'll tell you what works for me. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for listening to the end of the episode. Please, if you haven't done so already, and I say this often, if you've been here before, you know I love to say it, but please, I would love it if you would, this time, take 30 seconds, review this show in your podcast player. If you have the ability to also put in a written review like you do on Apple Podcasts, please do that for me as well. It helps other people find the show, and it helps me to continue to do what I love to do, and that is this, the Begin Within Health Show. Thanks again for being here with me. I will talk with you soon. Please continue to take good care of yourself. Have a wonderful day.